Hello, my beautiful mythical old souls, and a huge warm welcome back. Let's dive into the heart of beauty. And this episode is my All the Everything solo episode where I dive into an eclectic mix of topics. It's also the episode where you can join me live for the making of it and be part of its co creation. So, to join me live for the next one, make sure you're either subscribed to our Moonly newsletter at bemythical.com/moonly or a member of our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/bemythicalcommunity. That way, we'll let you know when I'm making the next one and you can come and join me for it. In this episode, I invite you into a mythopoetic journey through the good, bad, and ugly faces of beauty. Using the myth of Psyche and Eros as our guide, we'll explore how beauty shapes our lives in ways both profound and challenging. I reflect on the ways beauty can inspire admiration and connection, whilst also recognizing its power to provoke envy, projection, and even great harm. Together, we'll journey through Psyche's trials, discovering how outer beauty transforms through challenges. Finally, I'll invite you to consider beauty not only as a physical quality, but as a pathway to wholeness, healing, deep transformation, and ultimately union. And before we jump into all of that good stuff, I would love you to know about my upcoming Crucible for Women beauty potion. It's a quest for eternal beauty, and we go much deeper into the themes I introduce you to in this episode. You can discover more and register your interest at bemythical.com/beauty. And if you're struggling with the challenges of walking your soul path in this crazy modern world and would benefit from guidance, support, and kinship, come join our Academy of the Soul Unio. You can discover more and join us by hopping on over to bemythical.com/unio now or click the link in the description. And now back to this week's episode. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to January's All the Everything. And our really juicy, and to me at least, is possibly one of the juiciest of all topics, is how to be beautiful, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And maybe a surprise or two along the way. And the way I'm creating this episode is different to how I've ever done it before. You might already be aware that I typically create this as a co-creation with members of the Be Mythical Facebook group. The difference is this month, they're here with me now all the way through the show. And so it very much is a real co-creation, not just in the pre-show party, not just because they get the chance to be there and getting a sneak preview, but very much part of this journey we're going to weave together. And so even if you aren't here right now as I'm recording this, my invitation to you is to journey with this episode as if you are here in the room with me right now and we are co-creating this together. And my sense is you will get more from this by doing so in that way. So I will also say, and this has been increasingly the case with my All the Everything over the last year or so, my teaching style, and funny enough, on last week's podcast, I think it was, Aidan Wachter and I were talking about teaching and learning. And as you would have heard if you listened to that episode, my teaching style is very, very much like this anyway. I much prefer there to be this kind of co-creation and a weaving and a dancing between me and whoever I'm with. And so I tend to work in a much more Socratic style and ask questions rather than telling people the answer, because my answer is never going to be more powerful, more true than your deeper, most innermost answer. So for that reason, I invite you to make sure you've got something to write with, and ideally a pen and paper, because it really does connect you with a deeper part of yourself. So get ready to write down your answers. And if your handwriting is horrendous, which these days mine is, I think I described it recently as a raccoon on meth. we write so little by hand these days. It's usually not that great, but no one needs to see this. This is, as long as you can read it, that's the main thing. It's more about recording what comes up for you. So we'll begin with the very first question. I would love to know, why are you here? Why are you here listening to this episode? Differently said, what's your intention for this? What's your intention for joining me for this episode? I can tell you my intention. It is to have just so much fun exploring one of my, as I say, favorite topics in the world with you all. That's my intention, and to create something beautiful as we do. So, those of you who are joining me live, what's your intention? Oh, and I'll probably share some of the intentions and some of the answers as we go. So as I read these out, I'm reading out what's being shared with me again in the Be Mythical Facebook group. So, to dance with beauty. Remind myself of why I'm beautiful and wave in the face of some niggling insecurities. Oh, I got such a visceral image of that just then. Gorgeous. Yeah, really potent intention. And the other wonderful thing is, and this wasn't consciously chosen, but in our Academy of the Soul Unio this month, we are journeying together on a quest around the body. And of course, this particular episode about beauty, has real connection to it. So we're kind of like, this is a little side quest for all of us who are also on the body quest. And if you're not, there's still time to join us. I'm curious how inner beauty and outer beauty work together or don't work together. Well, my sense is that very intention will be met. Open to expressing my beauty more shamelessly, integrate it as part of my medicine. Gorgeous. Yes, I can feel, and it doesn't surprise me actually, knowing how deep many of you are on your path, that you're already getting a sense of what's available when we journey with beauty in a conscious way. Okay, so next question. What is beauty to you? And I'll give a little bit extra there. How would you define beauty if you were to describe beauty to someone else? How would you do so? What is beauty? What is beauty? And I'm going to share in a little bit some of the ways beauty has been defined over the centuries. And it's interesting. And I'll also share a couple of dictionary definitions of it as well. But before we do that, I would really first like to know how you would define beauty. Beauty is what makes your soul sing. What a beautiful way to say it, if I may say so. The thing that bring a glow to my heart. And I'll read one more. Combination of the emanation of divinity, full openness, love, the acceptance of your own essence radiated through physical form. Okay, I can't resist. I'm going to read one more. What someone, the eyes of, beholds as favorable traits, visual and virtual virtue. Beautiful. Okay. And I'm just going to ask you as kind of a next level down of that same question. I invite you to close your eyes. And I'm going to ask the question again. And then I'd like you to answer just in 5 words. So, what is beauty to you? What is beauty to you? And answer that in 5 words. And the reason I'm asking you to close your eyes and just answer in 5 words is often it elicits something that is much more from the subconscious and even the unconscious. It allows us to make contact with something that perhaps isn't the obvious or the kind of what we think is the right answer, acceptable answer. So, what are your 5 words? Five words. And when I say 5 words, I don't mean necessarily, I mean, I guess it could be, but generally not five words that make a sentence, more like 5 separate words. And they may not make sense. They may not be, um, you know, all nouns or all adjectives. They could be a real mix. They may not be things that necessarily make sense or belong together, ordinarily speaking. Radiance, honesty, jovial, stylized, overflowing. Beautiful. Feeling, somatic, eyes, nature, me. Oof. Yeah. So I'll just give everyone a little bit longer to answer that before I make an invitation. So just invite you not to do anything with it necessarily, but if you answered both of those questions, so well, same question, but asking it and answering it from a different place, whether you can see a difference in the way that you answered it when I first asked you, and then the second time when you answered from that other place. Just notice what's there, what differences show up, and why that might be. So just notice. And if, like some, you're finding it difficult, just allow yourself some grace and see what comes as we journey. Okay, so I often do this when I'm working with something. I like to know roots of words and definitions of words. But the dictionary definition, there's variants, but they're roughly saying things like a combination of qualities such as a combination of qualities such as shape, color, or form that pleases the aesthetic senses, especially the sight. Another version of this, but again, very, very similar. The quality of being pleasing and attractive, especially to look at. So you might notice already that your definition isn't necessarily going to be the same as that. Doesn't make your definition wrong, of course, but it's interesting to notice that what we sort of collectively, in quote marks, agree is the definition of beauty isn't actually our own felt sense of the word, which I think is an interesting thing to notice from the get-go. But also, this concentration on is not necessarily only the visual, but there certainly is in both definitions I read. There is this kind of like, especially the physical, and probably makes sense in a way because the word comes from the Latin word bellus, which means pretty or fair, which kind of takes us even more in the direction of this kind of more focus on the physical, which again is interesting to notice, but of course it isn't the only way of seeing that word. I'm going to also share with you some quotes from famous thinkers and creators over the years. So Aristotle said in the 4th century BCE, the chief forms of beauty are order and symmetry and definiteness. Oscar Wilde, beauty is a form of genius. It is indeed higher than genius, as it needs no explanation. And that's not actually a direct quote of Oscar Wilde. It's a character actually in The Picture of Dorian Gray. Pablo Picasso, who is one perhaps we might say knew a thing or two about beauty. Beauty, to me, it is a word without sense, because I do not know where its meaning comes from, nor where it leads to. John Keats, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all. And lastly, and I must admit, I kind of dig this one. Coco Chanel, beauty begins the moment you decide to be yourself. So we can see from that real range of quotes and definitions that beauty is indeed in the eye of the beholder. And that saying itself apparently has quite ancient roots. It kind of goes back to themes that people like Plato and Aristotle were journeying with. This kind of like there is subjective but also objective qualities of beauty. Apparently, the way that we now say this, beauty is in the eye of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, comes from a novel called Molly Bourne, written in 1878. But it's certainly a phrase that most people know of and we're familiar with. But what I'd like to invite you to journey with during the show is whether beauty itself, not only what we see as beautiful, is in the eye of the beholder. Said differently, do we each have a relationship to beauty that's uniquely right for our soul? And what might us making that relationship to beauty conscious provide to us in terms of those breadcrumbs on our soul path to healing, individuation, and unity? So that's really the journey we're all taking together in this episode, understanding whether beauty itself, not just what is beautiful, is in the eye of the beholder and what that shows us about our own soul. Okay, we are going to go deep. We're also going to, just because I love to weave in as many beautiful things as I possibly can, journey a little bit with myths, and particularly the myth of Cupid and Psyche from the book The Golden Ass by Lucius Apuleius. And probably by now, if you've joined me for shows before, or certainly if you've joined us for any Be Mythical Crucibles, you'll know that often we weave in, I think in fact we always weave in, archetypes and myths. And the reason we do this is working this way really allows us to sort of step outside of our conscious ideas and stories, often which come from our kind of modern cultural conditioning and our wounding. And they allow us to step into a more mythical, archetypal, divine even view. They show us gifts and powers and themes that otherwise we may not be able to perceive. They also evoke within us powers that we can feel. So that's really, I think, why myth is as human to humans as breathing and eating. We can see this in all cultures. And again, that's really why we include it in all the work we do. So we are going to journey a little with Psyche. We can't go as deep with Psyche as I would like, just in the time we have available, but I certainly will be going much, much deeper in my upcoming Crucible beauty potion. But we'll certainly touch on this because there is so much in this myth that shows us something about beauty. So I'm going to start by reading just the first few paragraphs, just to kind of like show us like how much is held in this seeming like, oh, it's just about, what we find aesthetically attractive. No. Let Psyche show us otherwise. A certain king and queen had 3 daughters. The charms of the 2 elder were more than common, but the beauty of the youngest was so wonderful that the poverty of language is unable to express its due praise. The fame of her beauty was so great that strangers from neighbouring countries came in crowds to enjoy the sight and looked on her with amazement, paying her that homage which is only due to Venus herself. In fact, Venus found her altars deserted, while men turned their devotion to this young virgin. As she passed along, the people sang her praises and strewed her way with chaplets and flowers. This exaltation of a mortal gave great offence to the real Venus. Shaking her ambrosial locks with indignation, she exclaimed, "Am I then to be eclipsed in my honours by a mortal girl? In vain did that royal shepherd, whose judgment was approved by Jove himself, gave me the palm of beauty over my illustrious rivals, Pallas and Juno. But she shall not quietly usurp my honours. I will give her cause to repent of so unlawful a beauty." Thereupon she calls her winged son Cupid, mischievous enough in his own nature, and rouses and provokes him yet more by her complaints. She points out Psyche to him and says, "My dear son, punish that contumacious beauty. Give your mother revenge as sweet as her injuries are great. Infuse into the bosom of that haughty girl a passion for some low, mean, unworthy being, so she may reap a mortification as great as her present exultation and triumph." And if you're wondering, as I did, what contumacious means, it means stubbornly or willfully disobedient to authority. So that's how Venus saw Psyche's beauty. So before we go any further, I'd love to know, just again, really give yourself a moment. What showed up for you? What did you notice about beauty in that short passage, which introduces us to 3 figures of the myth: Psyche, Venus, also known as Aphrodite, Cupid, also known as Eros. What did you feel? What did you see? What did that show you about beauty? Venus is looking ugly. Well said. Well said. There's something fabulously paradoxical right there. So, yeah, well seen. So there is something, and I hope already, if you're new to working with myths, you perhaps saw how they can elicit a different perspective, something outside of what we've experienced so far. Beauty creates projections in others' psyches. Yes, absolutely. It certainly does. Certainly does. So I really, again, invite you, whether or not you're here with me and willing to share your answer, really take a moment to notice what showed up for you. So I'm going to give you a very brief synopsis of the overall myth, because again, we don't unfortunately have time to journey through the whole fabulous story, but I'll just give you a little bit of synopsis in case it's not familiar to you, or perhaps, you could do with a little nudge of your memory. And then we're going to journey with the different themes, again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So as you've just seen, Psyche started out as this mortal woman, a virgin, in fact, whose extraordinary, disobedient beauty made even Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, jealous. So envious she was, she sent her son, Cupid, on a mission. And this bit wasn't quite clear in the little passage I just read, but she sent him on a mission to make Psyche fall in love with a vile creature, a monstrous creature. However, when he saw her, he, Eros, or Cupid, fell in love with Psyche himself. Plot twist. And then he secretly took her as his bride, although he forbade her from looking at him. So Psyche at this point is living in this just absolute luxury and, so in love and, having really good sex every night, but doesn't know her husband's identity. But then, ... she has these 2 jealous sisters who we met in the opening paragraph. They persuade her to light a lamp and look at him while he sleeps. When she sees him, she sees who he is, she sees how beautiful he is, she kind of jerks and drops the oil from the lamp, which lands on his face, if I remember rightly, and, wakes him up, and he leaves. So then, and this is kind of a major part of the tale, but again, we're only going to be able to touch on these themes. In order to, win him back, really, Psyche undertook this series of really, close to impossible tasks that were assigned to her by Venus. So there is a kind of a kind of theme of, obviously, you've got Venus who hasn't yet been able to punish her in the way that she wanted to punish her. And so there is clearly a kind of underlying desire where she's like, okay, she's going to fail at these nearly impossible tasks. So I'm going to get my vengeance. And from Psyche's perspective, she's like, well, I will do anything to see if there is a way of calling Cupid back to me. I always find it hard to call him Cupid, even though you'll notice I'm going to move between saying Cupid and Eros and Aphrodite and Venus, because I tend to relate to them more as Venus and Aphrodite. So if I do that, apologies, it's for that reason. So her trials include sorting an enormous pile of seed, fetching a golden fleece, collecting water from a deadly river, and descending into the underworld to retrieve, and I love this, a box of beauty. And it's never really explained what this box of beauty is. And it certainly was part of my inspiration for the naming of Beauty Potion, the crucible I mentioned. But she's asked to go to the underworld and retrieve this box of beauty from Persephone. And I also have a real love for Persephone, so it's kind of like a bonus that we get to meet Persephone in this too. And so Psyche, surprisingly, accomplishes each task with the help of assistants. And so as the myth ends, after successfully completing all of these tasks, Psyche can't resist. Of course, you probably imagined it. You've got a box of beauty. What are you going to do with it? You're forbidden to open it. What are you going to do? You're going to open it. And so she opens it. And why? I don't think, if I recall, it's actually said directly why she opens it. You could perhaps surmise she opens it to make herself even more beautiful. It could be curiosity. And I think, if I recall this correctly, it's not actually said directly which of those two it is. I could have that wrong, but I like to think there is a kind of there's a number of things going on there. Anyway, she opens this box and falls into this death-like sleep. But then Eros shows up, revives her with a kiss, and appeals to Zeus. And Zeus grants Psyche immortality so they can be united forever. And so the story ends with this union, this integration of love and the soul, and eternal happiness, because they all lived happily ever after. So that is, again, a very brief synopsis of one of my absolute favourite myths. We're going to journey through different themes, looking at that. I think someone said because she is human. I think that's an answer to, like, why might she have opened the box? Because she's human. Yep, right there. In fact, side question: who would have opened the box? I think I would have done. I think I would have opened that box. So let's now look at these distinctions, the differences around the good, the bad, and the ugly. And of course, this is just my own take and how I've been playing with these themes. There's lots of different ways of looking at this too, but this is my invitation to join me on this journey with these themes. So we begin at the very beginning of the story with this idea of beauty being something that is inspiring and something that draws admiration. And so there is this kind of sense of like, it's wonderful, sensual and magnetic. And it can even, as we see, across the world through our history, it inspires creativity, inspires harmony even. And so we've got that right at the beginning of the story of Psyche, where we have this, like, just, she is inspiring all of this focus, this devotion, this admiration, including the love of Eros. And so there is just, this absolute, all we can see at this point is goodness and beauty and wonderfulness. And we can see this show up in lots of other archetypes and myths too. We might look at Lakshmi in Hindu mythology, who is, again, this goddess of beauty, also prosperity, and is seen as this blessing, this, it can overflow and uplift and inspire. So my question to you is, what is the good face of beauty for you? So this is the good of beauty. which might call radiance, inspiration. What is that for you? What is the good face of beauty for you? And that could be the good face that you see in yourself personally, or it could just be the way that you see the goodness of beauty, like examples, ways that you've seen that show up. What does that mean to you? Sorry. Tommy's answered my question about would you open the box, and he said only Pandora's. Any box that comes from Hades is a little bit risky for me. I think to everyone, actually. Okay. Expressive joy and love, compassion. Yeah. So there is for me a kind of real, I guess, innocence and simplicity to this aspect, this face of beauty, which we'll see that actually very clearly juxtaposed when we start to enter the bad and the ugly. But for me, there is a kind of, it's at the start of that story for good reason. There is a kind of like, this is a birthing of an energy where there is still this innocence, naivety, which is wonderful. It's wonderful. And there's more. So, what is the good face of beauty for you? And we'll now move on to the bad. So, this could be what we might describe, and this obviously comes in really fast into the story of Psyche. We have that just real envy. In fact, envy and jealousy that shows up for Aphrodite. And so we see this again and again in all kinds of myths and archetypes. We absolutely see that in Snow White. As we just said, we've seen this in the myth of Psyche, in the tale of Narcissus, that obsession. So we've got these kind of themes of vanity, competition, envy, this sort of like superficiality where it's like, oh, beauty is... and I think we've got a real, I don't know what quite the word is, like craze of this, just like much more superficial beauty that's coming with social media and the way that we can so easily share our image and filter our image and perfect our image. And so we are, I think, in many ways right now living in this cult of the bad face of beauty, we could say, and what this elicits in all of us. A difference between jealousy and envy. Envy are when we're looking out and we're like, oh, I want that someone else has. Where jealousy is more like, I want to keep the thing that I've got. And they're often, to be honest, although they do have those original differences, they're absolutely used in place of each other all the time. And I think to a point where they've almost started to change their meanings as a result. And I would say it's not even wrong to use them in place of each other at this point. And I'm a language pedant, so for me to say that, I think it makes it really legal to use them as you want. But yeah, there's the fable of the dog in the manger. I don't know if I think maybe Aesop's fable, and that's a really great example of jealousy where the dog is in the manger and he's like jealously guarding it because he doesn't want, I think, the cow. I can't quite remember who wants the manger, but whoever wants the manger can't have the manger because the dog is jealously guarding the manger. Good face reflects my essence, naked truth, innocence, gorgeous. When the face of it represents the truth of it inside, when you can almost see through it to its core. I'm always trying it here. Faceless is no facade. Sorry, I just realized this is going, I couldn't resist reading these. These are going back to the good face, obviously. And now the bad face. And so what is the bad face for you? Surface level, no depth, superficial, false, perhaps deceit, manipulation, exploitation, negative side of being self-serving. Some of your answers there take us starting to descend into ugly. We'll come there. But again, what is the bad face of beauty to you? Superficial beauty hiding rotten and decaying centers. So again, I think, and this is why for me, myths are just so rich because they just bring us so present to these things that are, again, so human. We all have a relationship to these things, and there's something about myth that just allows us to suddenly be brought present to it in a way that takes us deeper than perhaps if I were to just ask you, what do you see as bad about beauty? Perhaps it wouldn't elicit what's now arising. Arrogance. Yeah. Yes, that's a really great word. So we have journeyed through the good and bad of beauty, and now we are going to descend into the ugly. And this is um takes us into, there was a word already shared here, themes like exploitation, objectification that leads to kind of like much more than the objectification that we're kind of all doing and shows up in the bad. It's like this really reducing people to be objects in a way that creates abuse and use. It certainly brings danger, violation, violence. And so this takes us into, and there's, again, this has shown up in so many different myths and legends. We've got things like the siren in a Medusa, where there is this kind of switching of beauty into something that can really, actually cause you to die or turn to stone. And so with Medusa, she was actually violated by Poseidon and cursed by Athena. And so her beauty that, causes this violation, you could say, very overly simply, turns her into who she is, and really shows us that exploitation of beauty leads to destruction and this kind of like no one's winning here. It's just this cycle of violence. Of course, with Helen of Troy, we've got the way that her beauty is treated as this kind of like object of exchange and sparks the Trojan War. And then, of course, with Psyche, our friend Psyche, we have this extraordinary beauty, which firstly isolates her. She's being treated as though she's not one of everyone else. She's being worshipped rather than treated as a fellow human. But of course, this very again, this wonderful thing leads to all of the trials, the envy, and her literally facing death as a result of her beauty. And so, this is where we're talking about things like, beauty as a curse, making people vulnerable to harm and exploitation. The commodification, if I can say that, of beauty, like really reducing people to be tools and possessions, things that we can use to fulfill our needs. And then there's also, again, in the siren myth, there's this kind of like how beauty can seem as though it's one thing, but it can mask a danger. It can be used as a lure or a weapon. And so there is something, again, we looked at the bad, and now we're looking at this like much darker face where it really are, themes of death and destruction and violence are one way or another created through beauty. So what's that for you? And this is one I would really suggest you go gently with, because I suspect all of us have had experiences, whether we've been on the receiving end, a victim to the ugly side of beauty, whether we can see we were complicit in some way in the ugly side of beauty, and whether it's something we've seen out there in the world in others and been really affected by the way that this has caused such rupture, such pain. So go gently with that one. But if you're willing to share, I would love to know, what is the ugly face of beauty for you? And this is one, and again, there's so much that I could share on all of these themes, and I certainly will when we enter Beauty Potion. But there's it's the ugly side of beauty I can see in both myself, but I've certainly seen this show up in other women that can create such wounds and such fears of being beautiful because of what it could mean for us or has meant for us. Um, as I've shared before, I've had many instances of experiences of abuse and harassment, um, which not even necessarily consciously, but I think certainly subconsciously can really hold us back from being in our full expression for fear of what that will attract, what that will endanger, how that might endanger us. So it's this is something real. Again, we can sometimes look at myths in a way of like, and it was make believe, it didn't really happen, but it's revealing something. And this is really the power of myths. They are in some ways something that never happened, but they are also happening all the time, as I think it's Joseph Campbell once said, and many other great thinkers actually have said similar. Okay, so to see the ugly makes me feel physically sick, corrupted energy. Yes, yeah, there is definitely this corrupting feel to this. Yeah, just recovering from that, destroying, life taking. Yeah, it's yeah. There's so much. Yes. I'm just picking up on a line that you've said there. A hedonistic pleasure of beauty rots the moral fibers that make the virtues. Yes, there is. Oh, there is definitely this. Yeah, it links into so many other aspects of ourselves that, again, we can be very easy to project this on others and say only other people are committing ugly acts when it comes to beauty, where, really whatever we can see is there available in humans is an aspect of us somewhere in our own psyche. And the more we can be in relationship to that, the more we can move into this other stage or this other phase of beauty, which we're about to enter into. The ugly side, erasing dignity, breaking the spirit. It feels like an attack of the divine feminine. Yeah. So, if you know anything about me, you'll know that I love a happy ending. I could not leave the show there. And so as I was pondering what I was going to journey through in this show, I was like, I can really feel there is something here to journey through the good, the bad, and the ugly. How on earth can I leave everyone there? And of course, I don't need to leave you all there because there is an ending to the myth. And I'm going to read the ending to you now. And that will show us the final face of beauty. But Cupid, being now recovered from his wound and not able any longer to bear the absence of his beloved Psyche, slipping through the smallest crack of a window of his chamber, which happened to be left open, flew to the spot where Psyche lay, and gathering up the sleep from her body, closed it again in the box, and waked Psyche with a light touch of one of his arrows. Again, said he, have you almost perished by the same curiosity? But now perform exactly the task imposed on you by my mother, and I will take care of the rest. Then Cupid, as swift as lightning, penetrating the heights of heaven, presented himself before Jupiter with his supplication. Jupiter lent a favouring ear and pleaded the cause of the lovers so earnestly with Venus that he won her consent. On this, he sent Mercury to bring Psyche up to the heavenly assembly, and when she arrived, handing her a cup of ambrosia, he said, drink this, Psyche, and be immortal, nor shall Cupid ever break away from the knot in which he is tied, but these nuptials shall be perpetual. Thus Psyche became at last united to Cupid, and in due time they had a daughter born to them, whose name was Pleasure. And they all lived happily ever after. So this ending to this myth really shows us something else about beauty, a different face of beauty, which we could call beauty as union, beauty as this portal of transformation and wholeness. And again, it was so beautifully spoken about there, how Psyche goes through all of these trials. And, we start off looking at her outward beauty. She goes through all of these trials that require something different, this inner strength, this inner beauty, and then ends achieving not only eternal union with Eros, but immortality. So we see here beauty as this portal of union of inner and outer beauty. That she began with outer beauty, but through the trials, through the experiences, through the initiation, she then developed this inner beauty. And at the end, they was brought together in union. So if you know anything about me by now, I am even more obsessed with union than I am with beauty, which is saying a lot. So it probably gives you a sense as to why I love this tale so much. And I would love to know, and this is my final question, what is the union of inner and outer beauty for you? What is the union of inner and outer beauty for you? And I'll share. Hopefully this won't interrupt your own flow too much. But for me, it really is, we could use anything. We could use beauty. We could use courage. We could use, I think I'm so obsessed with beauty, I'm actually forgetting other things we could journey with, but they are multitude. We could choose pretty much anything to journey with in this quest, this ongoing quest of union. And again, there's many words we could use for union. We could use healing, wholeness, individuation, and then there is the kind of like the utmost, I guess, level of union, which we might describe as something like awakening or enlightenment. But again, we absolutely can journey with so many different portals to this path. For me, one of the there aren't many for me that replace beauty as the most profound way I can journey. And I hope this episode has shown you a bit about how that might be the case for you too. It might be that you have something that for you is even more powerful, and yet it doesn't mean that there isn't something in beauty for you too. It's not something we can really, ignore. It's part of the human experience. Beauty shouldn't be consumed, it should be sustained. Outer beauty may fade, but inner beauty can be grown, shared, and be everlasting in the ways we use love with others. The outer beauty should be approachable and foster closeness. The inner beauty should be radiant, outpouring, healing, and inspiring yourself and others. Gorgeous. Thank you. Connection at a soul level, the balance of light and dark, the full expression of my divine essence without exploitation and repression. Harmony, when the outer beauty serves the inner, when the inner beauty adds to the outer, the reciprocal relationship that sustains each. Gorgeous. So I would love to know, did this episode fulfill your intention for joining me for this episode? And my hope is it did, of course. But these are not things that are in my control. So I really hope that whatever you took from this episode, it's something that showed you something of your own soul, which is really, again, why I do anything, actually. So I would love to know, did this fulfill your intention for the show? And while I let you ponder, maybe share your answer to that, I would say to you, if you enjoyed joining me for this episode, there are many ways you can continue journeying in this kind of way, but in other ways. So the first and the most obvious answer is Unio, our Academy of the Soul. And so we get together twice a month in a monthly community ceremony, and again in a guidance circle, and we embark on a mythical quest each month together. And this really is a labor of love for me and Jonathan and the whole Be Mythical team. It's something that I just fall more deeply in love with every single month, every single circle and ceremony, actually. So if you're not already with us in Unio, you can find out more and join us. And again, if you join us now, we're right in the last 2 weeks of the body quest. And we've got the next quest beginning early February. I don't know the date off the top of my head. And I'm not allowed to tell you what the theme is. It's currently a secret, but it is one of my favorites. It's not on beauty, but it's one of my other favorites. And the link for that is bemythical.com/unio. If you are feeling the call of beauty and the myth of Psyche, and you'd like to go even deeper, and as we just saw, there were some real trials that she undertook that allowed her to create this union of inner and outer beauty. So I can't promise what we'll do in Beauty Potion is going to mirror those trials, and I don't think you'd want them if they did, but we will be certainly entering an initiation, and the result possibly could be eternal beauty. So if you want to, I haven't yet decided exactly when that's going to start or quite how that's going to take place. I only know it is going to be a thing of beauty. You can find out more at bemythical.com/beauty. And that one, unlike this episode, the crystal itself is only for women. Sorry, men. I know Jonathan is planning something wonderful for you later in this year, but Beauty Potion, for the moment at least, is for women only. If you are watching this on YouTube, or you are joining me in the Be Mythical Facebook group and you haven't yet found our wonderful podcast, which is coming close to 500 episodes at this point, you can find out all of those episodes at bemythical.com/podcast. And if you are, say, for example, watching on YouTube, or you're listening to the podcast and you're not a member of our Facebook group and you would like to join me for the making of the next All the Everything, because I certainly think I will be doing this again like this. I have absolutely loved it. So if you want to join me for the making of the next show, the link for that is facebook.com/group/bemythicalcommunity. Or just go to Facebook and search Be Mythical, and you'll find our Facebook page and our Facebook group. And so you'll be very welcome to join me for the live making of the next one. So just returning back to all of you in the group. Oh, yes, I've just want to read out some of what people are sharing. Perfect myth for me. Gorgeous. Yes, Dancing with Beauty. Remember some harmony I hadn't heard in a while. It did indeed. My intention was to know the link between inner and outer beauty, and it sounds like it's union. Perfectly met. It's been beautiful. Come to Unio. And 4th of February is the next ceremony Unio. Thank you, Michelle. So thank you so much for joining me. You've been wonderful. Sending you all my love. Mwah. I very much hope you enjoyed watching that. And if you did, and you're not already subscribed, then do hit that bell thingy and subscribe to automatically get each fresh new episode as it's released each week. If you'd like to find out more about the work we do at Be Mythical to guide and support old souls in this new world to live their own unique myth, do hop along to bemythical.com and you'll find out all the ways you can join us and go deeper with us on your own mythical journey. Lots of love for now. Mwah. See you again next week.